Hey there and welcome back to the channel. Scorpius here, and today is a very important day. We got our patch notes finally for POE2, and let me tell you, there's a lot of reading to do. So if you don't believe me, let me just show you what the patch notes look like. Yep, unless you want to go and read all of this and try and memorize everything and try and understand everything that's coming, what I did is I read that twice and I made sure that I made a list which is simplified and it's all the important stuff that we need to know. So obviously there's a lot of things to discuss, so I'm not going to take too much time on the intro. Make sure that you like and subscribe. If you want to watch me live, come to twitch.tv/Scorpius_ENT. Especially this weekend, we're going to have a blast with giveaways and subathons and stuff like that. But I'm going to include timestamps. If you guys don't want to be reminded with the things that we already know that were in the patch notes, you can skip ahead to the next point, but we're going to rapid fire some things that we already know just to get them out of the way. Number one, we know we're going to have an old and new league. Old characters are still present with a free passive tree refund. However, it's highly recommended to start fresh though, because a lot of the changes that we're going to cover in a little bit will not be included in the new league. Anyway, standard, hardcore, and SSF variations are going to be in the new league as well, if that's your thing. So moving forward, let's just rapid fire through these. Obviously, we have the Huntress with 25 new skills, 5 new Ascendancies, 100 new support gems and uniques. There's going to be 25 spears, 17 bucklers, 8 new endgame maps with different mechanics, 4 new unique strongboxes, 12 rogue exiles, and Asmerian wisps, and they will both have their own Atlas tree passives. The wisps, by the way, they teased 3 or 4 different animals. We can see now that there are 11 of them, which is good news. We have new socketable items, reliquary keys, new essence systems. We have new improvements on sound, art, effects, and environment. Corruption and cleanse mechanic for endgame will give us the crystalline shards for the Atlas points that our boy Dorian is going to help us with. Cleansing and Nexus, we know that it's going to change all of the corrupted maps around, and that's where we're going to be getting our fracturing orbs from. And we know that fracturing orbs is going to be the crafting material that we're going to use that locks one of the modifiers in place. Another thing is that if we die during the endgame maps, we can respawn and re-enter our maps up to 6 times. The number of portals will depend on the amount of modifiers on the waystone. We can enter and exit the maps as many times as we want if we want to store or sell items, which is a beautiful change that they did, as long as you don't die. So if you have the highest level of waystones, you will get 1 portal, which means 1 life, 1 death, but you can come and go like 25 different times. It's fine. Group play, everyone gets their own portals. Obviously, in boss fights, the map owners need to collectively respawn everyone. You cannot just individually respawn while the fight is still going on. Less towers, but better towers, we know that. Tablets add twice as many mechanics, and the higher the tier of waystones, the more bonus it adds. Towers can also be juiced up whenever we're running them. Maps affected by the towers is now doubled on average. Waystones can no longer drop at a lower tier than the map that you're in. So you do a tier 5, you cannot get a tier 4 or a tier 3. You will get a tier 5. And if you kill the final boss of that map, you're guaranteed that you're going to get a tier 6. So 1 higher than what you're currently doing. Final boss and final rare monsters in tier 1 maps have a 100% chance to drop a waystone that scales down the higher map tiers. Next, we have pinnacle bosses. We know that are easier to kill now and easier to access. We no longer gain XP or lose XP from dying in any pinnacle content, which is Simulacrum or Arbiter and stuff like that. And then lastly, one of my favorite things, Perfect Jeweler's Orb can now be used on a 2 support gem skill and set it immediately to 5 support gem skill directly. You don't need to use the other 2 Jeweler's Orb. So now that that's out of the way, let's go into the brand new things that we just found out. A boss for each faction has been added in the Corrupted Nexus. New corruption monster factions introduced. Corruption monsters have their skills rebalanced and visuals improved. Corruption maps no longer have +1, but they have mods that are harder. New mods also introduced here. So it's very important here, the corruption maps no longer give us +1. To open a Corrupted Nexus map, the waystone needs to have at least 3 mods. Nothing below that is going to open up the Corrupted Nexus, and we need to do that very, very early. On any map boss, if we skip all content and die to the boss, we can respawn back to the boss room, not all the way in the beginning or outside and get through all the map. And that way all of the content will be gone to prevent from refarming and dying on purpose. Killing rare monsters for completion no longer has a chance to grant monster mods to remaining rares. To compensate with this, rares have increased chances to have 3 or 4 mods, which is even more loot. Then we have a checkpoint now spawns when the last available optional content has been completed. Remember we discussed in the previous update, there's going to be optional content on the right side. So if you skipped something, that's what it means here. Breach, Delirium, Expedition, and Ritual now start spawning further away from the Ziggurat Refuge. Then we have chance for waystones to drop at higher tier is now removed from the Atlas tree. Next change we have is increased quantity of waystones has been lowered on the Atlas tree. Doriani has up to 10 waystones that you can purchase, either tier 1 or 1 tier lower than the highest one that you've completed, which is not a bad change here. Overseer tablets are nerfed. Used to add bosses to 3 to 7 maps, now it's gonna add 2 to 4. Overseer tablets also have new mods to account for the new wisp mechanic. Unidentified waystones now provide 30% increased waystone drop chance instead of quantity of waystones. Precursor tablets have new mods to account for the wisps and the rogue exile mechanics. Untainted Paradise map has been buffed. Used to give 150 to 300% XP, now it gives 200 to 400%. Not bad. Next up, we have the Ritual Favors tablet modifier is buffed. Used to give 5 to 10% chance to find an omen, now it gives 15 to 25% chance. Map Boss Overseer tablet modifiers used to have plus 10 to 20% chance to drop a higher waystone, now decreased to 5 to 8%. Precursor tablet suffixes that gave additional base chance now changed to increased chance. Rarity of items found modifier on tablets has also been nerfed. It used to be 10 to 20, now it's 10 to 15. Quantity of items has seen a very tiny change as well. Used to be 3 to 8, now it's 3 to 7. Pack size modifier on the tablets also nerfed. Used to be 3 to 8, now it's 3 to 7. Gold found modifiers on the tablets have been buffed. Used to be 5 to 10, now it's 10 to 15. Monster density on the breaches has been significantly actually nerfed. Was 5 to 10, now it's 4 to 6. Open faster mods on the breach tablets also nerfed. Used to be 8 to 12, now it's significantly lower, 3 to 5%. Crazy difference. The rare monsters gain additional modifier tablet modifier has been removed. Same for Simulacrum. The endgame quest for the Arbiter encounter, you know we had like a few of them, have been merged into one single quest. Now this one I marked it like this because we already know some of it, but I included it into the information that we don't know because they provided even more information. So all pinnacle bosses can drop their specific uniques at any difficulty. We knew that. However, rare uniques are even rarer at lower difficulties. Same for reliquaring keys. Next we have the stash in the Simulacrum has been moved to avoid accidental start of the encounter. Acquiring logbooks, splinters, and audience with the king has been nerfed on Atlas Tree. Delirium mechanics in maps reward 1 splinter each time a reward is filled. Simulacrum splinters can now be obtained through Delirium encounters in all map tiers. You don't need to go all the way to like tier 13 and above. Base number of monsters spawned in Delirium encounters has been reduced. Number of monsters, however, that spawn when touching fracturing mirrors have been increased. Intensity of the fog has been reduced. One of my favorite changes. Anyway, moving on. Number of monsters spawned from breaches has been heavily reduced. However, a higher percentage of the total number of monsters will be spawning sooner. So not a bad change, even though they nerfed breach a little bit. Breach splinters can now be found in all map tiers. Another good change here. Breach and Delirium encounters are now considered complete when you open the clasped hand and Delirium mirror. Strong boxes spawn more monsters. Omens are now guaranteed in ritual rewards, and there's a small chance that you can get a second one. There we go, we have another one of something that we know but additional information. New recombination system for crafting through expeditions, we know that. But here's the new and very important information. You can select which modifiers you want on 2 different items, hoping that you're gonna get the best of each one on the new single item. The more you choose, the lower the chance of success. And here's the important part. If you fail, the items will be destroyed. Let's move on to some pretty significant Atlas passive tree changes here. New notable passives added and some old ones reworked. For example, Deadly Evolution Atlas Keystone is replaced with Ecological Shift, which gives 40% more chance to obtain random extra content and 20% less monster packs in your maps. So adding this one is gonna most probably give you 40% chance of finding more strong boxes, essences, rogue exiles, wisps, stuff like that. Atlas passive points increased from 30 to 40. So now we're gonna have 40 of them to allocate, which is pretty cool considering that we have like new content that you can add into it. One of the first one that has been massively nerfed, and this one was the breach one. It used to be 15% for a chance of 1 extra breach, 5% for 3, 2% for 10. Now it's a 10% for 1, 3% for 3, and 1% for 10. Pretty significant change there. The extreme archaeology no longer causes monsters to spawn with 20% of their life missing. So they fixed that a little bit. No nerf, no buff, or anything like that. They just fixed. The frantic invasion has been nerfed. Used to be 75% increased quantity of breach splinters. Now it's 50%. The grasping hands notable has also been nerfed. Used to be 50% more clasped hands. Now it's 30, but used to have 25% chance for packs guarding it. Now it's at 20 as well. The interdimensional assault used to have 15% increased monster density. Now it's only going to have 10. The ominous portents, it used to have 50% chance of getting omens from ritual favors. Now it's 100% guaranteed. The rising pyre has been nerfed. Used to have 40% increased monster density in breaches. Now it's only going to have 25. Next, let's look at a few general improvements here. A massive crash caused by NVIDIA hardware with recent drivers will now attempt to recover the game while displaying a loading screen. So they talked about they were trying to figure out how to do it. They said that this change should fix everything. So hopefully it fixes it if you're one of those that have these crashes here. Next, we have reforging benches, stashes, and guild stashes have been repositioned, so we don't have running up and down and stuff like that in Act 1, 2, and 3. Strong boxes will now appear in Act 1 areas. Added stash to treasure room in TOC in Trial of Chaos. Fire skills will now burn grass in areas. Pretty cool visual animation there. Performance of summoning and reviving minions has been improved, and animation performance improved or changed to firebolt, grenade skills, decay buff, and much more. Now, I'm not sure why they presented the Atlas tree first and then the general improvement. I was just following their way of categorizing stuff, but it is what it is. Let's just move to the player changes, which is what we really care about, right? Level 25 required for cruel difficulty and level 50 for endgame. So now there's actually a requirement for whenever you get to cruel difficulty and endgame difficulty. I don't think this is going to be a problem for anyone. Unarmed base attack speed buffed from 1.2 attacks per second to 1.4. Killing, shattering, staggering palms, as well as Hand of Chayula attack speed has been nerfed. Now has 25% less attack speed and used to be 10% less attack speed. Freeze has also been nerfed. Build up is roughly 48% slower on enemies. Player base ailment threshold also nerfed. It's now half of maximum life instead of all of maximum life. Presence base radius also nerfed. Used to be 6 meters, it's now 4. Candlemas essence, the cruel version, nerfed. Used to give 8% increased life, now it gives 5. The worn sandals affliction in TOS, Trial as a Chemist, now grants 30% less movement speed if hit by the enemies. Used to be 25. Modifiers to curse effect will instead apply to curse magnitude, which makes them additive with any other modifier, which means the curse magnitude and slow magnitudes are now additive with each other for temporal chains. Ice crystals have also been nerfed, can no longer apply kill effects on enemies, which is a bummer. Heavy stun duration on players is now 3 seconds instead of 1. We can no longer block or evade hits while heavy stunned. Another big change here is the critical weakness stacks now track duration individually. It cannot refresh all stacks when getting a new one. Pinned targets are now lightly stunned and can no longer evade. Base duration of power charges has been nerfed. It used to be 20 seconds, it's now 15 seconds. Fully broken armor has been buffed. It now causes enemies to take 20% increased physical damage from hits. And the incensorily boosted slam used to have 20% more damage, now has 30%. Now let's go to the Ascendancy changes. I tagged each one individually for whatever it is. And once again, I'm going to be yapping a lot, so I'm going to speed fire through this because we have a lot of things to cover. So Titans, listen up. Surprising strength notable has been buffed. Used to be 40% more damage, now it's 50. Earthbreaker Notable, also buffed for the Titans, used to be 20% chance to cause Aftershock, now it's 25. Moving on to the other warrior ascendancy that saw some changes is the Warbringer. Warcaller's Bellow passive has been reworked. War cries now explode corpses, dealing 25% of their life as physical damage. Turtle Charm passive has been nerfed, now 25% less block chance, used to be 35% less block chance. Another one that was reworked for the Warbringer is the Encase in Jade. It now consumes all stacks of Jade to grant guard based off your maximum life for each Jade stack consumed. We have the Ancestral Spirit skill that we get from the Answered Call. It now has minions have 1% increased accuracy rating per 3 dexterity, 1% increased damage per 3 strength, and there's massive minion changes here. The Jade casters have been buffed. Its pinning skill cooldown lowered from 15 to 10. The Jade Hulk also been buffed. 300% more stun buildup, used to be 200. The Warhorn buff also buffed, now grants 10 rage on hit and 20% increased skill speed, used to be 5 rage and 10%. The Spirit Turtle's Power Shell aura also buffed, now gives 80% increased defenses instead of 50% and 40% increased block chance instead of 25%. Moving on, we've got the Gemlings. Gemlings, listen up. Enhanced effectiveness has been nerfed, now also grants 20% less attributes. The Integrated Efficiency passive has been reworked, swapped positions with Gem Studded, and it no longer provides +3 skill slots. It now instead causes skills to gain 20% increased damage per socketed red support, 6% increased skill speed per green support, and skills gain 20% increased critical hit chance per blue support. Implanted Gems has also seen a rework, no longer provides +1 to skill levels. It now has 3 choices: +2 skill levels for strength, dex, or intelligence. Next, we move on to the Witch Hunter. No Mercy passive has been buffed. Deal up to 40% more damage instead of 30%. Obsessive Rituals passive also buffed. Used to be 50% less armor and evasion, now it's 35%. Next, we have only one change on the Deadeye, and that's Thrilling Chase that has seen some rework. When you consume friendly charges, you count as having consumed twice as many. Next, we have some pretty significant changes to the Pathfinder Ascendancy, with the first one being buffed is Running Assault. Now grants 50% less movement speed penalty from skills, used to be 30%. Connected Chemistry has been entirely removed. Enduring Elixirs no longer has a prerequisite. New multi-choice passive called Practical Remedies. The choices are Immunity to Shock, Ignite, or Freeze. And then the other addition is Sustainable Practices, which provides you with 30% of evasion rating, also grants elemental damage reduction, requires Practical Remedies. So in order for you to get this, you obviously need to get that. Moving on, we've got a few changes on the Che Ascendancy of Monks. First of all, we've got Embrace the Darkness that has been buffed. It's +8 to maximum darkness per level instead of +5, which is not bad. Ravenous Doubts has been reworked. No longer provides Mana Leech is instant. Now provides Mana Leech recovers based on other damage types as well as physical damage. Then we have Honor Lost during TOS, Trial as a Chemist, is now taken before Darkness. Moving on, we've got the Invoker. Protect Me from Harm has been nerfed. Used to be 40% less evasion, now it's 50% less evasion. Lead Me Through Grace has also been nerfed. Used to be 1 spirit for every 6 energy shield and 1 spirit for every 15 evasion. Now it's 1 spirit for every 8 and 1 spirit for every 20. So you will need much more of those to get the same amount of spirit that we could get before. Next, we have Elemental Expression skill from Scatter Them to the Winds has been buffed. Now it deals 40% more damage at all gem levels. This is a very significant damage boost, and I'm really excited to try that skill now. Next, we have some changes on the Blood Mage. Blood Bard has been reworked. It no longer provides 10% of damage gained as physical damage. Now bleeding you inflict on cursed targets is aggravated. And then Blood Mages are also getting a brand new passive called Between the Cracks. Causes critical hits to ignore monster armor. Required Sagumancy. Infernalist Demon Form skill from Demonic Possession passive has been nerfed. Cooldown reduced from 20 seconds to 15. Maximum Demon Flame is now capped at 10 instead of being uncapped. You now lose a flat amount of life per second per stack instead of a percentage of max life. And also, dodge rolling distance while in demon form has been reduced as well. Next, on the Infernalist, Seething Body passive has been buffed. You and allies in presence gain 50% of damage, as fire damage used to be 20. So a 30% bump is a pretty significant one. Grinning Immolation has also been buffed, provides 50% more critical damage bonus instead of 30%, another 20% crit right there. And then Pyromantic Pact has been nerfed, causes 50% of Infernal Flame to be lost per second if none was gained in the past 2 seconds. Used to be 10, by the way, so 50 and 10 is a insanely significant difference there. When allocating this passive, you will now have at least one maximum Infernal Flame, even with 100% reduced max mana. Bringer of Flame has seen a rework. Now causes all damage from you and allies in presence to contribute to Ignite, Chance, and Magnitude, and it no longer requires Pyromantic Pact. Loyal Hellhound, however, has seen a pretty massive nerf. The 20% of damage from hits to be taken from the Hound's life before yours has been entirely removed. Master Darkness has been buffed. It now grants Demon Flame has no maximum, so whatever nerf you got over here, you can compensate with this one right here. And then we have small mana passives have been nerfed. They used to give you 4%, now it's going to give you 3% max mana. And lastly, animations have been fixed while blinking in demon form. Moving on, we've got the Chronomancer. Circular Heartbeat passive has been removed. Quicksand Hourglass, however, has been buffed. It's now every 10 seconds, gain 50% more cast speed for 5 seconds. Used to be 12 seconds for 4 seconds duration. And since they're removing one, they're adding something else. There's a new passive called Flood of Echoes. Simply grants you Unleashed skill. Next, we move to pretty significant nerfs for the Stormweaver. Number 1, Force of Will passive has been nerfed. There's 1% increased effect of Arcane Surge per 25 maximum mana. Used to be 15. Scouring Winds has also seen a big nerf. Exposure decreased from 20% to 12%. Strike Twice passive no longer gives 50% less shock duration. Instead, it gives 25% less magnitude of shock. And lastly, we have the small mana passives no longer provide 4% maximum mana. They instead give you 12% increased mana regen rate. And that is it for the significant big changes on the Ascendancies. Let's go ahead and see the passive skill tree changes in general. So due to the Huntress and other new game mechanics, they added, removed, or changed a lot of passives around the tree, as well as new clusters. New Blind, Volatility, Ranged, Melee, Hazards, Companion, Presence Radius, Aura, Parry, Banner, Bleeding, Thorns, and Quiver related clusters have been added. There's a new Crimson Assault Keystone added, which causes bleeding to be aggravated and base bleeding duration to be 1 second. There's also a new Trusted Kinship Keystone added, allowing you to have 2 companions of 2 different types. Causes companions to have +1 to each defense for every 2 of that defense that you have. But if you get this one, you sacrifice 30% of your defenses. So tread carefully with that one. They completely removed Break Focus, Hold Focus, Lasting Concoctions, No Escape, Pinned Down, and Potent Concoctions. They also removed 12 different jewel sockets. Acrobatic has been nerfed. It's now 75% less evasion from 70%. Eldritch Battery, no surprise there, is also nerfed. Now doubles mana cost has been added to that node. Cat-like Agility has been buffed and now provides 40% evasion rating instead of 25, not bad. Falcon Technique, once again, no surprise, has been nerfed. It's now 1% attack speed per 25 dexterity and used to be 15 dexterity. Then Freedom of Movement has been reworked. Instead of 30% evasion rating with dodge rolling, it now provides 10% reduced movement speed penalty. Heavy Buffer has also seen a rework. Instead of 10% reduced max life, it now grants 5% of damage taken, bypasses the ES, Energy Shield. Then we have Icebreaker has been nerfed. Freeze threshold equal to 50% of max ES instead of 100. Mana Blessing has seen a rework. No longer provides 5% increased max mana, but instead gives 20% increased mana regen. Master Fletching has seen a significant nerf. Bonuses from Quiver decreased to 20% from 30%. The two small passive nodes have their value dropped from 10% to 6%, but the two passive nodes after this node now provide 20% chance to inflict ailments with projectiles and 15% projectile stun buildup. Pile on grants 30% armor break debuff effect. Polymathy has been nerfed, 7% increased attributes instead of 10. Raw mana also nerfed, 8% increased max mana instead of 12. Spaghetti, I'm not saying the whole name, Spaghetti, you know what I'm talking about, has been reworked, now grants plus 13 attributes instead of 7% attributes, and negative 7% chaos resistance instead of negative 13%. Attack damage with nearby ally passives in the Killer Instinct cluster has been replaced with 10% increased attack damage. Effect of aura, small, and notable passives have been nerfed. I didn't color this one, but it is nerfed. The small passives used to provide 8%, now they're 5%, and notables used to provide 20%, so pretty big significant changes there for the effects of aura. Moving on, we've got skill changes. Almost all skills have been reworked, rebalanced in some form. New gem tag added called conditional, which is what we're going to be finding to new gems probably. This is for skills that cannot be used unless a given condition is met, like the combos, for example, parry into something else with a huntress. Mana cost for all attacks, marks, and war cries has been reduced, especially at higher gem level, which is a good thing. Minion damage and life scaling has been lowered at higher level. Arc no longer deals more damage for each remaining chain, only if you add quality, which even that is lowered from 0 to 5% to 0 to 2% more damage. Archmage obviously is getting slammed. Now gains 3% damage for each 100 max mana at all gem levels. Used to be 5 to 6% at higher gem levels. Mana cost of spells has been increased to 6.7 to 6.1% from 5%, and quality no longer adds more damage. Instead, it reduces reservation. Artillery Ballista now converts 100% of physical damage to fire from 90%, and quality now provides additional base attack time. Barrier Invocation now only builds energy from enemy hits to energy shield rather than all hits to energy shield, and gains 1 energy for each 10 ES lost instead of 5 that it used to be. Bleeding Concoction has been buffed, has 200% more magnitude of bleeding instead of 100. Blink is now a travel skill, which means, as they clarified, that if you have multiple travel skills, they now share cooldown. Bone Blast has been buffed, has 40% chance to inflict bleeding on hit from 20%. Bone Storm Shrapnel has been reworked. It's now a mechanic called Impale, which causes the next attack against the enemy to gain added physical damage equal to 30% of damage dealt. Not bad. This existed in POE1, so I think it's going to be a good change. Next, we have Cast on Shock. No surprise, has been nerfed. 1 energy per power instead of 2 energy per power. Combat Frenzy also nerfed. The frequency of gaining the charges has been reduced from 2.4 to 1.5 seconds to 5.3 to 4 seconds. Unarmed weapon sets are now required to use concoction skills. Conductivity has also seen a nerf, scaling up to negative 29% lightning resistance instead of negative 36%. All curse skills have been nerfed, with their delay increased to 1.5 seconds instead of 1. Dark Effigy critical hit chance reduced to 7% instead of 11, and quality is now 0 to 20% chance to inflict withered instead of 0 to 50% chance, which is a big and significant change there. Decompose has been nerfed, which means that its chaos damage has been reduced from 30 to 39% to 10 to 19%, which is again another big one. Despair scaling up to negative 24% chaos resistance instead of negative 36. Detonate Dead also nerfed. Physical damage decreased to 9 to 10% at lower leveling, scaling higher obviously, but used to be 20% to all levels. And its fire damage has decreased at higher levels but increased at lower levels. Explosive Grenades also got nerfed. Cooldown increased from 3 to 7 seconds. Detonate time increased from 2.5 to 3 seconds. Next, we have some buffs, and surprisingly, it's Eye of Winter. So Eye of Winter has been buffed. Damage of corresponding type increased to 75% instead of 50%. Falling Thunder also buffed, 50% more damage per charge and used to be 25. Flame Blast, we're back to the nerfs. Flame Blast has been nerfed, 15-second cooldown added. Damage decreased to 75% from 200 125 damage decrease. Its quality now provides 0 to 20% more cast speed from 0 to 10. Flame Wall has also seen a significant nerf. The fire damage to projectiles passing through the wall used to be between 64 and 91 damage at level 20, and now it's going to be 33 to 48, so that's cutting it in half. Next, flammability as well. The fire resistance scale reduced to 29% from 36%. Then we have some positives here for a little while before we go back to the nerfs again, but a freezing salvo's freeze buildup is up to 107% from 50%. The radius of the pulse and explosion has been increased for Frostbomb. Now freezing shard will fire 2 less projectiles, but will have 50% more freeze buildup than before. Frozen Locust has also been buffed. Overall damage is increased. Gas Arrow, Gas Grenades, and Decompose now have a limit of 6 poison clouds, which is not a very good thing. Grim Feast has been entirely removed from the game until they decide what they're going to do with it. There's no reworks, there are no changes, buffs, or nerf. It just does not exist anymore until further notice. Moving forward, Hammer of the Gods has been reworked. There's no cooldown anymore. However, you need 20 glory to use it. Glory is obtained by heavy stunning enemies. Herald of Ashes explosion radius slightly increased, and the quality adds overkill damage contributes to base ignite damage. Herald of Ice explosion radius slightly reduced. Herald of Thunder's bolt radius slightly reduced, and obviously a big nerf for the Herald techs. Herald skills can no longer trigger from kills caused by them. Next, Hex Blast, also nerf, can no longer explode curses with infinite duration. Max explosions per cast is now at 3 instead of 9. Hyperthermia, just like any other reduction of the resistances, it went from negative 36% to now negative 29%. Ball of Lightning's actual ball does not hit the enemies. Just a clarification from GGG. Skeletal Clerics will no longer run at enemies, which is good news for anybody running the Clerics in their build. Incinerate has been buffed, 25% less ignite duration from 50%. Leap Slam now has more stun buildup. Lightning Bolt has 200% more chance to shock from 100%. Lightning Conduit, however, 20% more damage with hits from 100%. That's a huge 80% difference right there. Pretty significant nerf for Lightning Conduit. Then we have a few nerfs on the Lightning Rod Arrow specifically, which makes it now disappear after chained 6 times. Previously used to be 8 to 10 times. Now they have 1 second charge up. However, the lightning arrows that chain to the lightning rod arrows cause the pulse instantly, which is not that bad. Next, we have Mana Tempest quality has been buffed, now increased damage gained as lightning. The Pain Offerings aura has also been buffed. Now it grants higher increased damage rather than simply more damage. Also grants scaling attack and cast speed of 22 to 58% instead of a flat 30% to all levels. So the max is 58 where it used to be 30%, pretty decent buff there. Perfect Strike has been reworked. No longer guarantees an ignite, and attack speed base reduced to 35% from 45%. Quality now provides more ignite chance rather than magnitude. However, its area of damage, they've said that it has grown and became wider, which makes it harder to miss, which is not bad. Poisonous Concoction has been buffed. Magnitude is now 200% instead of 100 and deals physical damage instead of chaos. Profane Rituals radius slightly increased, which is not bad. Raging Spirits have been nerfed. Duration increased from 4 to 5 seconds, but max spirits summoned per spell cast is now 2 instead of 5. The minion revive scales to 60% more slowly instead of 31. Skeletal Arsonist explosive demise damage also reduced to 12% from 15, but its explosion radius slightly increased. Skeletal Frost Mage's ice bomb cooldown increased from 6 to 8 seconds, which is a nerf. Skeletal Storm Mage chain count has been increased to scale up to +4, used to be +2, so it's a slight buff right there. Skeletal Warriors have been removed from the gem cutting menu. Existing Skeletal Warrior gems will be Skeletal Snipers instead. When you get Warriors from the Scepters, they will now allow you to summon additional skeletons by reserving Spirit in addition to the 2 free skeletons that you're getting anyway automatically from the Scepter. Stormwave has been buffed, 100% more chance to shock. Soul Offering also buffed, increased spell damage from 32-39% to 56-77%, pretty significant there, almost double. No surprise, Spark has been nerfed. Number of projectiles has significantly lowered from 6 to 14 that it used to be. Now it's 4 to 9 and no longer increases projectile speed. The quality of the skill, now instead of adding more projectiles, it simply increases the speed of the skill. And lastly here, we have a huge rework and what I can only see as an insanely big nerf to the ground to Tempest Bell. The impact is the only positive thing here. Impact now deals a max of 490% more damage rather than 316%. However, it now requires 10 combo points to use instead of 4. The bell is destroyed after 10 hits instead of the previous maximum of 19. Its quality only adds an extra 2 hits instead of 6. Additionally, 30% damage per elemental ailment and 60% of physical damage on the bell have both been removed from the skill entirely. They have been replaced with 30% of physical damage as extra damage of each type matching an elemental ailment. In addition, its max attack damage has been reduced from 211% to 132%, and it can only trigger a shockwave once every 250 milliseconds. If all of that was not enough, Tempest Bell limits the number of bells placed is now shared with other copies of the skills. So you no longer be able to have 2 different Tempest Bells and place them separately. Anyway, moving forward, let's go to the support James real quick. We're starting off with Astral Projection that has been slightly buffed. Its area of effect, instead of 35% less, it's going to be 25% less. Brutality has been nerfed, 25% physical damage instead of 35% physical damage. Cannibalism, instead of 4% life recovered, it's now going to be a 2% life recovered. And then we have Burning Inscription, Capacitator, Consider Casting, Crescendo, Fist of War, and Impetus have their cost multipliers increased, which is a nerf. But then we have Closed Combat, Lockdown, and Neural Overlord have their cost multipliers decreased, which is a buff. Feeding Frenzy and Meat Shield will be nerfed, can no longer support minions which are undamageable, with the addition that Meat Shield now grants 35% less damage instead of 50% more max life. Hourglasses damage reduced from 40% to 30%, Magnified Effects cost multiplier increased to 130%, and area of effect reduced to 30% from 40%. Mobility has been nerfed as well, 25% less movement penalty instead of 30%. Overcharge has been reworked. It now reflects shocks caused by support skills back to you. Potential has been buffed, 40% more chance to critically hit when consuming power charges instead of 30. Scattershot has been significantly nerfed, 35% less damage instead of 20% less damage, which is pretty big. Strip Away, 20% increased effect instead of 30%, and Unbreakable has been reworked with different multiplier values for incoming light stuns instead of heavy stuns. Okay, next we have some pretty big unique item changes, with the first one being Against the Darkness. This one has been significantly nerfed, so the radius has been lowered from large to medium. The attribute mods that we could get for 2 to 4% is now 2 to 3%, and it no longer grants 1% max life or mana, instead it gives you plus 8 to max life or mana. Astramentis has also been nerfed, now has 50 to 100 to all attributes compared to 80 to 100 before. Aziri Disdain has its extra maximum energy shield decreased to 10 to 15% from 25 to 30%. However, damage taken reduced from 25 to 10%, and maximum mana increased to 100% from 60. So not bad. Crown of Victor has been nerfed. Rarity is now at 10 to 15% instead of 10 to 20%. Dream Fragment has also been nerfed. Maximum mana increased by 10% instead of 20%. Everlasting Gaze has decreased the maximum mana as ES to 4 to 6% instead of 20 to 30, which is an insanely big difference here. But the mana regeneration increased to 40 to 60% from 50%, and maximum mana increased to 40 to 60 from 50. So a little bit of buffing and a big chunk of decreased maximum mana because they're trying to nerf the mana stacking builds. Next nerf is on the Ghostwraith body armor, 25% of max life to energy shield from 50%. The Hand of Wisdom in action, the Howa gloves as we call them, have also been nerfed. Lightning damage to attacks per 20 intelligence instead of 10 intelligence, so now you're going to need more intelligence to scale in the same way that we're doing now, and now gives 1% attack per 20 dex instead of 3% per 25, which is a pretty significant change. And next we have Ingenuity belt has been completely reworked, and obviously it's going to be a significant nerf to what we knew. It no longer scales to 40 and 80% and above, but instead it will now have 20 to 30% bonuses on left ring as one modifier, 20 to 30% bonuses on right ring as a separate modifier, and charm slots and charm charges gained as separate mods. So it's going to be an item with 4 or 5 different mods that you'll need to try and find the best one. And I think it's still going to be a very, very significant unique, but it's entirely reworked. Melting Maelstrom is also nerfed. It no longer recovers all mana when used. The Regalia has a lot of changes as well. Massive rework. First one is positive. The number of modifiers increased to 3 from 2. However, rarity of items, max life, max mana, and attributes mods on this item have been completely removed. Spirit mods have been nerfed from 10 to 6 to 10. Defenses mod has also been nerfed from 10 to 6 to 10. Elemental resistant mods has also been nerfed in the same way, from 10 to 5 to 7. So now it's no longer going to be all a 10. You can get a 6 or 7, a lower tier, or whatever the case is. And there's going to be 7 new additions to the Regalia that we can roll that they didn't actually mention any of them. We need to figure out what they are whenever the game starts. Oaksworn Shield has been nerfed, no longer has 50 spirit, instead it's 50% life regen rate. Pillar of the Caged Gods, somebody called this and I didn't think they're going to do it, but they did. Instead of 2% attack speed and area of effect, it is now 1%, and instead of 10% weapon damage per 5 strength, it's now a 10 strength. Queen of the Forest also nerfed, 1% movement speed per 800 evasion rating, used to be 1% movement speed per 500. Temporalis has also been nerfed, causes skills to have -2 to -1 seconds cooldown reduction from -4 to -2, so pretty significant cooldown reduction there. Time Loss Jewel magnitude of damaging ailments modifier has also been nerfed from 10 to 20% to 5 to 10%. Time Loss Jewel faster damage from ailments modifier also nerfed from 3 to 7% to 2 to 3%. Time Loss Jewel energy generation modifier also nerfed from 5 to 15 to 4 to 12, and the Warcry buff effect has been completely removed from Time Lost Jewels. And with that, let's move over to some normal item changes. Runes have 3 tiers, the lesser, the normal, and the greater. You can reforge 3 lesser to get a normal, 3 normal to get a greater, pretty straightforward, and runes drop rate has been doubled, which is not a bad thing. Val Orbs can no longer cause a modifier with a value of 1 to be reduced to 0. Base damage of crossbows has been buffed. Physical Thorns damage on rare item modifiers has also been buffed by up to 3.5 times. So let's see all of those physical thorn bills now. Rarity of items found modifiers have been nerfed. The suffix mods now can go up to 25% from 30%, and the prefix can go up to 25% from 32%. Also, the golden charm rarity is now at 15% from 20%. Breach rings drop rate significantly reduced. Effect of auras has been completely removed on jewels or time lost jewels. Scepter's level of all minions has been slightly nerfed. Used to be +5 levels of minions, now it's only going to go up to +4. Maximum mana modifiers on amulets have been nerfed. Used to be 5 to 10%, now it's 3 to 8%. And maximum mana mods on all items has also been nerfed. So on belts, gloves, and boots, you can now roll up to 124, nothing more. Helmets can now roll up to 149. Wands, scepters, and staves can now roll up to 164, and the rings can go only up to 179. All of these numbers are for the maximum mana mods specifically. Next, debuffs you inflict have increased magnitude slows. The modifier that does that on gloves has been completely removed. Lightning damage mods on weapons are slightly nerfed, and TOS Trials Alchemist relics that add additional options to merchants has been nerfed. It used to give us 2 or 3 extra options, now it will only give us 1. Moving on, we have a few monster changes and we're almost done here. Armor on all monsters have been reduced by 30%. Soul Eater now grants 1% skill speed and 1% less damage. It used to be 5% and 2, which is significant. Max stacks are now 50 instead of 45, so not a bad thing. Stone-clad gorillas deal less damage with their leap slam, which is good news. Mighty Silver Fist dodge roll deals less damage. Reduce the amount of monsters that can be alive at once in rituals. Electrocute now builds up 44% slower on monsters. Pin now builds up 58% slower on monsters. There are now enhanced rare monster modifiers that are much more powerful than the normal versions but more rewarding, and some rare modifiers scale at later levels, making them even harder but again more rewarding. And lastly, we have some cool interface changes. Spectate mode is now available for your party whenever you die in combat. Ability to pan the minimap overlay when using controller. Hovering over a skill in the skill bar will now show us its description. Instilling menu can no longer be closed if you have an item in it, which is good because sometimes we lose our item. Ritual rewards menu now pauses the game. Item filter gem levels now apply to uncut gems. Changes are now highlighted when leveling up gems, which is good. I really hope that they do that for everything else in the game as well. Visibility of text and icons under monster life bars have been improved. Improved character panel with a lot of features and stuff there and extra information that we need. Relics can now be quick move to the relic altar when using a controller. Set targeting mode per skill added for controllers. Picking up items will no longer fail when skills are in progress when using a controller. Reloads and ammo bindable actions for crossbows on controllers. Redesign the cosmetics equipment interface and can be now open with chat for easier access. This is pretty cool. Multiple skins and items have been enabled and added in the microtransaction shop, and they fixed a shit ton of bugs. And that, ladies and gentlemen, were all of the most important things of the patch notes. I really hope that you guys enjoyed this video, that it was simple enough for you to get the most significant changes that are coming up in a couple of days. If you appreciate this video and it helped you out, please slap a like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps me out a lot. And don't forget that we are live on twitch.tv/Scorpius_ENT, especially over this weekend that's coming with the launch of the brand new update. We have giveaways, we have subathons, we have a lot of things that are coming up this weekend. And as always, I'm going to see you guys on the next YouTube video, which is most probably going to be a brand new leveling guide of the new Huntress class. So, see you there. Thank you very much once again. Peace.